好，大家好。
好，大家好，欢迎来到新田面对面。那我们临时做这个直播呢，就是因为美军是在伊朗政权呢，针对他的3个关键的核设施、核基地呢进行了袭击。然后川普总统刚刚是做了5分钟的对全国和全世界的讲话。现在呢，我们就是为了帮助大家来了解这个情况，我是再次请到了来自伊朗的地缘政治专家Tamuz给予特姆兹以泰先生。那在之前呢，我已经是有采访过他好几次，他的对于这个伊朗和以色列这个之间的这个战争的解读以及对美国川普总统的他的这种思路的解读呢，很多的朋友都觉得是非常的有道理，所以我觉得呢，再一次邀请到Tamuz来到我们的节目对于目前的这个情况做一个他的一个洞察我觉得可能对大家也非常有帮助。那同时呢，因为今天是 live 嘛，是直播，也涉及到翻译，我就请方伟一起来做同声翻译，这样的话我们也有可以更多的互动。
Translator here.
Hi Tamuz, welcome to our show again.
Hi, thank you.
All right. Yeah, so now we all already know that the U.S. military carried out a massive precision strike on the 3 key nuclear facilities in the Iranian regime. So just overall, when you heard the news, what's your reaction? What's your thought?
Well, it was definitely one of the possibilities, a very real possibility. So it wasn't that surprising that it happened. I think in terms of tactics, they did it very well. Trump said, give me 2 weeks, it will happen. I'll make a decision within 2 weeks. And after a couple of days, he attacked. He sent
He intentionally did that.
Well, I mean, we don't sit in his head. We don't know, but I mean, it stands to reason that he said 2 weeks. I'm not sure he knew in advance he'll attack tonight. Maybe he thought he'll attack tomorrow, the day after. But the fact that you say 2 weeks, it doesn't mean it will happen in 2 weeks. It can happen tomorrow, and it can happen in 4 weeks if you wanted to delay. But this is a usual Trump tactic. He doesn't let the enemy know, keeps them always not sure what's going to happen. Just like he sent some bombers west, and it kind of maybe confused some people. And then he sent the real B-2 bombers east. But it's even more than that, because the assumption of many people was that they will not send the B-2 bombers directly from the US to go all the way to Iran, bomb, and go back. The assumption was that they will send them first to Diego Garcia, which is a little, I guess, less than an island in the Indian Ocean, which is like a British military base, but the Americans use it. Send them there, and it's a much shorter run to attack from there, just a shorter flight.
Okay.
But the problem was that the British didn't want to get involved. And if the US will attack Iran from a British territory, the British will be involved. So I think one of the considerations to send them directly, other than fewer moving parts so fewer people know about it, was the British didn't want to get involved, and this is how they don't get involved, even though it's a more complicated mission for the American pilots.
Okay, hold your thought. I need to translate. Okay, 好，那基本上就是伊朗时间凌晨2点30分我现在跟大家说一下整个的情形。6架美国的 B-2隐形轰炸机从美国密苏里州的怀特曼空军基地起飞，飞越了6500英里就1万公里，奔袭伊朗中部的福尔多这个核设施然后呢，在4万英尺的高空下投下6枚3万磅14吨重的超级钻地炸弹，这就是刚刚发生的事情。那川普总统也做了发言。那 Tamuz 呢，其实是以色列的专家，他其实以前是以色列空军的那么他给我们做一个点评刚才他点评2点，第一点呢，他就说什么呢？他说川普显然是做了打了个障眼法。说我2周考虑，结果2天就动手了。刚才今天就问他说他有意的还是无意的，那藤木说我也不知道他在想什么但是他的推测，他其实推测是有意的了，因为他2天要打，他要准备2天肯定
对，
所以呢，川普你已经决定要打，我认为然后就说我要花2周时间，我在within2周 但是他已经决定了，这是第一点。第二点呢，
我补充一下，就是特穆斯就讲说，这个是川普他经常用的一种方式，对吧？他就让对手啊，让敌人啊摸不清楚他到底在想什么，在准备干什么。
第二件事情，如果这个看到这个新闻的话，或者看这个方伟昨天早上的节目的话呢，我就专门有报道说哈，不是昨天早上，今天早上就6架这个 B2 轰炸机。从这个怀特曼空军基地飞起来，往西飞到关岛，就好像从关岛再飞起来，再要去打伊朗一样。结果呢，大家新闻都去关注那个东西。结果呢，它是6架，另外6架，美国总共就19架哈，6架这个做掩护，另外6架从这个怀特曼飞起来往东飞越欧洲，再去到这个叫做直袭伊朗。所以特穆斯先生他刚才说呢，大家都猜哈，本来可能是关岛的飞机。飞到这个叫做印度洋中的叫做什么来着 Diego Garcia， 这是一个英国的空军基地，但是英国人显然不想参与，所以呢，美国就是变成了一个，这是另外一个障眼法，飞机拿一个飞机往西飞，这个骗大家，让伊朗会觉得说还有1天才能到，结果这边就突然开炸，就飞过去了，这是他的另外一个这个方法哈，所以川普的障眼法就让你就是猜也猜不透哈，这就是陈博士的评价来。
好。So so it's very interesting, and also Trump said this time the strike is very successful, almost like a wipe out Iranian's regime's capability, right? In terms of
that's what he said, yes.
So how's your estimation?
Yeah, how truthful that is? He said obliterated, completely destroyed, right? What's your assessment? How do you view that?
It's really hard to know. I mean, I doubt Trump will lie on something like that, because if he lies tomorrow, the Iranians will show pictures that it's not destroyed. But whether it's obliterated in the sense that nothing remains, or that just there's nothing usable and the whole mountain is collapsed, we don't know. We'll probably know in a while. But I would say it's probably, he wouldn't lie about something like that, because it will be the happiest day for the Iranian regime to prove that he was wrong.
Yeah, OK 那基本上这个今天就问说，这川普说彻底摧毁哈，那么他怎么看？说川普说的是真话假话？他说他不知道，首先不知道，第一，第二呢，他觉得川普不会吹牛，
就这种事情上面
这吹牛的话，第二天明天这个叫做伊朗跑出来在宣扬说，你看根本没有打到，我们这挺好的，那就让川普很丢面子嘛。所以呢，就是说川普应该是不会说谎哈，基本上说的是一个实话。
Yeah, okay, yeah, and also Trump mentioned, he's telling the Iranian regime, say either peace or there will be more strikes. And it will be even more tragedy for Iran, far greater than what we witnessed, in the past 8 days. So what he means, there's still maybe they still have some facilities, but it's very easy to target. So is that true, or what's your estimation?
Well, obviously, to hit that nuclear manufacturing bunker in the middle of a mountain is a very difficult thing. So other strikes are easier, technically speaking. I think Trump reiterated again and again that they used overwhelming force. Nobody else can do it, but Iran has still another chance to make peace. He always tries to give, so far, always, no matter how forceful he is, always tries to give them a way to climb down and make peace. And obviously, if they continue, he threatens even worse. And if they hit Americans, he threatens even worse. And obviously, the American military can deliver that.
OK 好，那基本上就是说，川普无论说什么哈，他不管打得多厉害，他还是会说我会给你和平，
他给他一条路，
给他个选择，对，
给他投降的路。
对，你要不要我插句我的评论？我认为这个和平就是投降。
对，其实Tamuz我之前采访他的时候，他就有提到嘛，就是川普啊，他就是说他一直是他不把战争把这种袭击呢作为好像首要的一种选择但是他不会就是说真正需要的时候他也不会犹豫，所以这次他就没有犹豫，对吧？决定去轰炸他。但是他说川普呢，经常他也不会说把他逼到狗急跳墙，因为当你把一个像这样的一种就是恐怖主义的政权你把它逼到这个墙角 让他走跳墙的时候呢，其实结果也不会太好，所以他还总给他留一条缝儿，让他就是说，还是能够说，你如果能够要使出善意，能够来投降的话，还是可以有这样的一个机会哈。所以我想这个 Tamuz 呢，以前也是这么解读的哈，所以我觉得。反正很多朋友都觉得他的这种解读还是蛮准确的。Yeah, so I was just reiterating what you said before about how Trump is always, try to give another chance, right? So Tamuz, then how do you think Trump described how this strike is a cooperation, a seamless cooperation with Netanyahu and the U.S. military? So what's your comments on that?
Well, I mean, we don't know the details, but obviously, since Israel has been carrying attacks into Iran all day, if the Americans want to do something, they need to coordinate with the Israelis, right? Where the planes will go, where the planes will not go, how to manage that. So that's, I mean, one level of cooperation. The other level, the more like technical level. The other level is obviously, Trump told Netanyahu in advance they're going to do it. I guess Netanyahu was very happy. I think that's what he wanted from the start, because 10 days ago, Netanyahu also knew that without America, they can't destroy this nuclear facility. So I'm sure Netanyahu was hoping to get that kind of reaction from Trump. What went on in their conversations, we don't know. The only thing I can say is that it's a lot easier to help Israel in this sense than to help Ukraine, because Israel is successful so far. And Ukraine, despite all the money that America put there, not in Trump's time, but it hasn't managed to be as successful. So I'm not comparing the two situations are different, but it's easier for the U.S. to support something successful to bring it past the finish line.
OK， 好，我来说一下这个今天问的问题，就是说，就双方的配合哈，川普高度赞扬了双方的配合，他怎么看这个配合哈？那当然，首先军方肯定得配合好嘛，因为以色列整天都在攻击伊朗，那美军现在进来入场了哈，你肯定得协调好嘛，不能双方撞起来，这是第一点。所以呢，第二点呢，就是内塔尼亚胡肯定非常喜欢美国入场嘛，其实他一直都知道他自己单手想把伊朗给单挑了，那其实是不可能的哈。像美军下场的话，他当然非常的高兴啊。那另外，
这是他希望的嘛。
是。
然后他也有对比说这个就说美国去支持以色列跟支持乌克兰的一个对比。乌克兰的话，虽然美国一直给了那么多的钱，但是他就是说他跟俄罗斯的这个战争，其实他没有很大的一个先手，对吧？
对。
但是以色列呢，其实都一直挺厉害的，
一直打赢，打的胜仗，打的胜仗，所以
美国
锦上添花。
对，美国去搬这个扣机，他以前也讲了扣这个扳机嘛，他以前也讲过，所以是锦上添花是更容易的。那我想我们的观众朋友，您如果对我们请到的这个专家有什么样的问题的话，也欢迎大家在留言里面提出来啊，是非常难得的机会。因为如果尤其是看过我几期以前的节目的话 ，Tamuz 啊他的这些评论、他的观察、他的分析哈，对于这个伊朗和以色列的形势啊局势，其实还真的是蛮就是大家很认同哈，所以欢迎大家借这个机会。好的，那so Tamuz, how do you think this strike? What's the significance, or how it will affect the whole situation at the Middle East, and also like the other, we all know like like especially the Chinese Communist government, right? It's trying to you analyze how it invested so much on Iran, right? So what do you think this strike will have an effect on the whole situation and also with the CCP?
Well, let's try to break it down. First of all, the declared goal of the U.S. strike was to make sure Iran doesn't have nuclear weapons. which is something Netanyahu has been working for all his political career for 4 decades. And Trump has been pretty consistent in saying he doesn't want Iran to have nuclear weapons. He just didn't say it has to be by military strike, but apparently now he decided that that's the thing. So if Israel destroyed most of the rest of the nuclear enrichment capability of Iran, and now the US destroyed the rest, then from a certain perspective, Trump can say, okay, my part is over. Unless Iran attacks, I'm done. Now Iran, let's make peace, because I don't care who rules Iran as long as they don't have nuclear weapons. The question is now, what will the Iranian leadership will do? And this is actually, Mark Twain said that history does not repeat itself, but it rhymes. And there is an interesting story, because if you remember, in the 1980s, there was a war between Iraq and Iran. Iraq was led by Saddam Hussein, and Iran was led by the previous leader, Ayatollah Khomeini, who was the first leader of the Iran under the current regime. And the current Ayatollah is the one who succeeded him. So they were fighting and fighting and fighting for like over 6 years. There was, the first few years that they were fighting, Iran managed to push Iraq back. But from 1982 to 1988 or something like that, they were just killing each other with chemical weapons, with all sorts of stuff. And at a certain point, the Ayatollah, the then leader of Iran, had to agree to a ceasefire. And back then he said something like it was for him to drink a cup of poison to agree to a ceasefire with Iraq. And he did, and he apparently got depressed and died a few months later, and he was as old, he was in his 80s, like the current one. So the current Ayatollah is facing a similar choice. Is he going to give up the past 30-something years of effort to build nuclear capability and reach some sort of deal, which for him, and he's also in his 80s and apparently has cancer, so similar situation. Or will he insist to fight till the bitter end? I think you should translate it. Then we'll continue.
OK， 好吧，那基本上就是说，他现在说这个川普就会说，川普原来就是说他的目标就是不能让伊朗有核武器。那现在美军已经出手，已经做成这个目标了，所以美国人可能就说，那我做完了，我拍拍手，我就推到边上去了哈，因为目的已经达到。那么下面就看这个伊朗他怎么回应了哈。他就刚才讲到说，他为什么说马克吐温呢？
马克吐温他说过一句话，
没关系，他就讲这个两伊战争的事情啊。两伊战争呢就开始打哈，后来这个打的这个就基本上就是互相之间的一个叫消耗战。后来这个好像动用这个化学武器，当主要是那个萨达姆侯赛因哈，动用化学武器打得非常惨烈。打了8年之后呢，最后双方就达成停火。那个时候呢，伊朗的这个领袖啊是霍梅尼，大家知道霍梅尼，那个就是伊朗的叫最高领袖。他最后说停战的时候，他签署停战协定的时候，他就说好像喝了一碗毒酒一样哈，喝了一碗毒药。那霍梅尼当时不久他就死掉了，他当时也是80多岁了哈。那霍梅尼的叫做继任者就是今天的哈梅内伊啊，他是跟当年也差不多，他也80多岁了。那现在是不是再要喝一杯毒酒啊？然后呢，这个他基本上自己也有癌症，所以呢也是很衰弱哈，说不定这个这挫折这一把的话，也很快要死掉。所以这就是历史上的这个故事啊，他还没讲完，继续讲。Yeah, go ahead, please.
So some people may say that decision back then in 1988 saved the Iranian regime, but they have to give up their aspirations. So, I guess if the current leaders decide to give up their nuclear program altogether, they may have a chance to save their regime. And if they don't, it may be the end. We don't know, but that's what seems to be the situation. And obviously now Iran declared that all American soldiers and people and bases in the Middle East are legitimate targets now for them. And we'll see what they do. They can also try to close the the way for all oil tankers to get in and out of the Hormuz Straits,
right.
which will also stop a lot of the oil from Saudi Arabia and other places.
Mm-hmm.
All of these are things that they may do, but Trump was very clear that the price for all of these things will be total destruction. So the question is whether they want to do it or not. I don't think it's exactly the same situation, but there can be some sort of maybe a similar miscalculation to what Hamas has done, that they thought they can beat Israel. And now I'm not saying that what's happening now in Gaza is a disaster, but it's really like, I don't know how Gaza comes back from what happened.
Okay.
So I think that's so Hamas is much smaller than Iran. Obviously, Gaza is much smaller than Iran, but Israel is much smaller than the United States. So I think it's a cautionary tale, right? The same with Hezbollah. They thought that they can beat Israel and they were decimated. So I think that's really a question whether how the calculus works in the minds of the Iranian leaders, because from how the American generals and leaders see it, if Iran does the wrong thing, they're gone. But the question is, and whether the Iranians understand it the same way, or do they have some sort of delusions that they can survive even if they attack the U.S.?
OK， 好的，那他现在说呢，现在就跟当年一样哈，也许当年霍梅尼就是喝下这碗毒酒哈。
对，我这插一句，这个刚才他讲的马克多那句话，他的意思就是说历史不会重演，但是常常会押韵，就是有相似之处。
是，对所以他就说霍梅尼当年呢，这个喝下毒酒，签署这个停战协定哈，所以才让伊朗这个叫做这个政权那么也活命活到今天。那么现在呢，这个哈梅内伊呢，他也是舍不得他30年的一个叫做核计划嘛。但是呢，如果他签署停战协定的话那有可能让这个政权再活下去，否则的话这个政权可能就死掉了哈。那现在伊朗的回应是什么呢？伊朗有可能呢，他也有可能就是会去，就是现在要把美国因为他已经说了，美国如果打我们的话，美国在中东所有的地方都是他的这个攻击对象。那他会打这个美国在中东的这个叫军事基地吗？他会封锁霍尔木兹海峡吗？如果封锁的话，那所有基本上包括沙特阿拉伯在内的所有的石油都运不出去，包括他自己的石油都运不出去。这样的话呢，那会带来什么结果？他说很可能他们会算错了，因为如果这么做的话，一定被美国消灭掉但是也许呢，他会读得不准，他读这个形式的这个叫做方式，可能跟哈马斯当初攻击以色列的时候这个读的方式一样错。哈马斯就是大的算错了他攻击了以色列之后，自己就处于一个灭亡的状态。那伊朗也是类似的情形所以呢，现在就是看说他们的脑袋里他脑袋里那个算的东西他有没有算错了，他自己也不知道。
Yeah. Continue, please.
So there's actually a book, a very interesting book that was published about a year ago. This is the book. I don't know if you can see it. It's reverse.
Yeah,
it's reverse. So I'll tell you what the book is. It's called The End of Everything, written by historian Victor Davis Hanson.
Yes.
And it takes about 4 or 5 cases in ancient history about certain civilizations that didn't really realize their true situation. And they were fighting somebody much stronger. And they believed they can survive. They were in delusions, like Carthage against Rome. And the end of it was not only that they lost, that the whole civilization was wiped out completely. And he tries to explain how this happened. And one of the things I'm learning from this book, which I recommend to your listeners, I don't know if there is a Chinese translation, but I guess there should be, is that the people on the civilization was about to be destroyed, they didn't believe they're going to be destroyed. They believe they're so strong, the gods will protect them. They've been invincible in the past. Nobody can beat them. Even when they see forces 10 times larger outside their city gates, they believe they will survive. And this miscalculation leads them to provoke the enemy to a situation that the enemy thinks, if we don't completely destroy them, they will always give us trouble.
Okay.
So I worry that the Iranian leadership may have this kind of thinking, and then it's gonna get more dangerous before it gets less dangerous.
OK, let me translate that. OK， 他就是说他刚才举了一本书哈，叫做维克特汉森的这个新书。
对，这个书我其实采访过，
对，
汉森教授。
所以的这个辛田跟 Tamuz 的想法都差不多了哈。虽然他们没有事先对过，但是这本书呢名字叫做一切终结之处哈 ，The End to Everything。那这本书讲的就是4个文明如何覆灭哈。他讲当年在北非的迦太基王国就当初挑战罗马嘛，对不对？那结果就完全算错了，最后呢，不仅文明覆灭，整个文明完全被消灭掉，消灭得干干净净的。就他会算错，他会觉得他就算面临10倍于他的敌人，他会认为他的城墙可以挡住这个罗马的军队，结果就会挑动罗马军队，就是下定决心一定要把这个迦太基给灭亡掉。结果呢，也确实把迦太基灭亡掉了。所以他就认为说，伊朗很可能就会做同样的做同样错误的一个计算，最后结果会带来整个国家的一个覆灭。Okay.
Yeah, and if you're talking about continuing to answer your question, the countries in the Middle East, I think most of them just don't want it to become a big war, and they want to not be involved, leave us alone. Whether it's like Saudi Arabia or other countries, they just hope it gets resolved, and Iran is not a threat anymore. They don't want it to become like a big war over their territory. Because like if this is Israel and this is Iran, in the middle you have like Saudi Arabia, Jordan, Iraq, the Emirates, Syria, Lebanon, all of these countries, even if they don't want to get involved, it will happen over their territory. So they really, some of them, like even Qatar has a huge US base. So, I think these countries really want Iran to surrender at the current stage. After the US, maybe before the US attack, they would ask Trump not to attack, but now that he has, I think they hope it will be resolved quickly.
OK， 中东的阿拉伯国家都不希望在中东有一场大战哈，所以呢，他们事先都劝川普别打。但既然川普已经打了，他们肯定希望说赶快这个伊朗投降吧，赶快投降啊！这件事情不要再闹起来了，让伊朗成为一个无害的国家。因为这些国家，刚才他举的这些国家，沙特阿拉伯啊、卡塔尔啊，卡塔尔里头还有这个美国的空军、美国的军事基地哈，他们都非常不想这个中东再打起来，他们就希望说赶快这件事情平息下来。那平息是什么意思呢？就是伊朗就赶快投降就算了哈，放弃核武器，成为一个无害国家。
Yeah, so Tamuz, last time when I did interview with you, you analyzed how the CCP has invested so much, trying to make Iran its biggest agent in the Middle East, right? So now this strike happened. What do you think the potential impact on the Chinese Communist government?
Well, there are two sides: the impact on the Chinese Communist government, and also the impact on the U.S. with regards to its relation with China. So, I mean, we'll have to wait and see what happens. It's a little too early to say, I think, but I'll put it this way. The CCP has put a lot of money and a lot of investment into the Iranian regime. And I'll go even a step further. I don't know if all the experts will agree with me. The Iranian regime would not have had the ability to project terror and to build all these nuclear weapons to that level without the CCP continually buying oil from them despite the sanctions the past 10 years. I mean, they started the nuclear program with China in the 1990s. China didn't help them back then that much. But at least in the last decade, a lot of their ability came from either buying oil, the CCP buying oil from them cheaply for the CCP and supplying them with military technology, civilian technology, infrastructure, all of these things. So part of the reason that the Iranian regime has become more and more capable was the CCP. So obviously, if it becomes less capable, then some of their investment or all of their investment goes to waste. But whether that's the case, we really have to see what happens, right? Whether they decide to make peace with Trump and what kind of peace, whether they try to fight, how fast it ends. Because just a scenario that I hope doesn't happen, but if we're talking scenarios, let's say the Iranian regime doesn't surrender and starts attacking American targets, and the US attacks. So if it's a short run and then they surrender, it's not that big of a difference from where we are now. But if it starts getting prolonged, from one side, the CCP lost its investment in Iran, it's no longer a nuclear country. On the other hand, the US is distracted and working on Iran instead of working on China. So they lose here, but they win there. So I would say from the US perspective, the important thing is not to lose sight of the main geopolitical issue of these times, which is the threat of the CCP. And make sure that even though sometimes you need to fight the proxies, in this case Iran, you need to make sure everything you do does not damage the main goal, which is to contain the CCP. And I'm sure they're working on it. Behind the scenes, they haven't said anything, but I'm sure they're working on it.
OK， 好，他就讲到说，这个新田问的问题就是说，关于这个对中美的影响，对中共的影响是什么哈？那这个汤姆斯说，他对中美的影响是什么？对中共的影响呢？首先，当然了，这个在过去10年之内呢，中共给了伊朗非常多的帮助哈。包括伊朗已经被禁运这个制裁了那么长时间了，但是呢，伊朗的石油都可以运出来，还可以卖给这个中共卖出钱来哈。所以呢，还有各方面的这个工业力量啊、军事力量都得到中共的这个加强。所以这一次对中共损失当然是非常之大的哈。
对，他是说，在他看来啊，他觉得也许不一定所有的专家都认同他的看法。他认为呢，如果没有中共这样的一个支持哈，就包括这个买他的石油嘛。那他觉得伊朗呢是在目前不会有那么强大的核武器力量的。
是，那另外呢，他就说这个美国这边呢不要失焦啊，永远记住中共是美国的第一敌人啊，不管他中东现在做了什么，他都要想着要回到他的战略重点去啊。对，讲的就是这个叫做针对中共哈。
OK，yeah，
好。
So Tamuz, you have any other observations you would like to add?
Any other observations? I think we kind of need to look at things not just at what people do or whether or what people say in a certain moment. We need to try to take a look at the trends, at where this is going, and because otherwise it can be very confusing. This day somebody said this, the other day next day somebody said the opposite. So it's really hard because most people don't have access to CIA information or something like that.
Or Israeli
intelligence information or something like that.
Right.
But otherwise it's you move emotionally or intellectually from one extreme to the other, but if you kind of try to understand what are the goals and how the different actors think, then it kind of makes it easier to not predict but to not be that surprised when certain things happen. The other thing I will say is that it's actually an anecdote, but I think it's an interesting anecdote. It's 20 years ago, and it's been published, I think, enough in the media, so it's not a secret. Israel, tried to sell weapons to China. They haven't done it in recent decades, but 20, 30 years ago, they tried to sell China all sorts of weapons. So one of the weapons they sold to China was a surface-to-water missile. Missile you shoot at ships. And then the CCP gave it to Iran. And Iran gave it to Hezbollah. And Hezbollah used it to shoot Israeli military ships.
Oh.
So I will say this, for every American or Western company that sells something that can be used against Americans, even if the Chinese promise not to do it, they will give it, even if they don't do it themselves, they will give it to someone who will give it to someone who will give it to someone who will use it to hurt your people. So we need to be aware of this.
Yeah.
OK， 好的，那最后就是他
Story
补充了一点，就是历史上的一个故事吧。当年呢，这个以色列以前卖武器给这个中国哈近10年没有了，过去有。那卖武器给这个卖了一个叫做地对舰导弹。那这个导弹卖给这个中共之后呢，中共再转手卖给谁来着？卖给伊朗，对，伊朗再把它卖给这个黎巴嫩真主党最后就拿以色列卖的这个导弹去打以色列的军舰，所以呢，就是说有些事情啊，你不知道会发生什么哈，谁会转手卖这个，所以你这个叫做
要想清楚，
对，要想清楚。这美国他的意思就是美国不要给这个中共这种高科技的东西，那中共倒过头来，你不知道绕过多少手，最后打到美国人头上去。
对，Tamuz 他前面讲的一点呢，他就其实是。他在之前的我采访他的时候，他有讲到的，因为其实最近嘛，因为就是说川普总统他有表示出说要去介入这个以色列战争，这种跟以色列跟伊朗局势，但是有的人就觉得说他不会，他是反战的，但也有后来有说他是他口，对吧？有的人就觉得说川普好像又示弱了之类的，但是呢Tamuz 他的一个分析哈，如果大家有兴趣可以到我前面这个节目去看看的。他就说你要了解川普他的想法到底是什么，他要的结果是什么，那你就知道了，就是说他会怎么做，然后他真的做出来的时候，你也就不会那么的意外了。所以我觉得就是说总体来说 Tamuz 他的这种思路哈，他的这种观察呢就和分析哈，还真的就现在是验证了说川普还就真是这样的。那因为之前我听到有人在评论说他是不是 taco 啦，怎么样啦，但是Tamuz 他的分析就不是这样的。那我在这里不能说再去啰啰嗦嗦的把那个我之前对他采访哈再去多说，但是没有看过的朋友可以强烈的推荐你哈回去看他过去我大概发布了三个他的采访。然后呢，同时如果是一些新的朋友最近因为我发现有很多的新的朋友来看我这个节目，因为都是专家的深度解析嘛，很有深度，然后呢又是比较独到的一些见解但是呢其实订阅的朋友就相对来说比例很少，像我上一次的节目有这个多少将近4万的朋友来看，因为我的频道都很小嘛，但是呢就是订阅的就是说看的人数大概70%多都是没有订阅的。有的朋友可能觉得说没有关系我新来的，以后我就来看看就好了。但是呢油管它有它自己的算法，如果你是新的它推给你了，你看到了，但是你没有订阅的话，它下次可能就不推给你了。那你再找我呢就不一定找得到了，因为还不那么熟悉嘛。所以呢其实你订阅一下对你没有任何损失所以就推荐您建议您订阅一下，打开小铃铛，这样的话呢就像这个 Tamuz 他这样的非常非常棒的这一些就是很透彻的一些观察和解析呢您就可以很及时的收到，也不用说伤脑筋要去找新田这个频道了。所以呢在这里就是提醒大家一下。
好的
OK， 那我们看看有朋友就是说提到问题这个 JK so Tamuz we have some audience has some questions. So JQK 说我想问一下嘉宾怎么看待国内哈瑞迪教派的犹太人。哈瑞迪教派犹太人怎么翻译？这个我还不太懂。So this audience ask what's your how do you see there's Jews one type of Jews Haredi
I don't know.
Haredi it's a
你不要这边上别的，我再查一下。
Okay, let's go to another one first. So so I think you probably already answered, but Jason was asking the Iranian regime, will they just retaliate very hard and to United States? Could it be a prolonged war?
We don't really know the answer to that. So that's the short answer. We don't know. Back in 2020, when Trump killed Soleimani, the former head of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard, Iran retaliated, but they called America and told them, we need to shoot some missiles to save face, but if you don't move out of your base, nobody was going to be hurt, and they did that. They shot some missiles, but nobody got hurt. So learning from that, it seems like from their perspective, they need to do something to save face. Whether they just do something to save face and make sure it's not big enough so that the US doesn't come down very hard on them, or whether they really think they have a chance to have a prolonged war, whether they really have a chance to beat America. This is what I was just talking about. I don't think they have a real chance to do that, but it doesn't mean that they think that. So the question is how realistic, how grounded the people who run the regime in Iran now are. Whether they see the situation as it is, or whether they think they can do things that probably they can't, in terms of prolonging it. So, but if they try to, it may take longer. So we'll have to see. But we don't really know, and it really depends on hopefully the U.S. or somebody else has spies in there. So they know how the leaders think, if the leaders are really rooted in the true situation of things, or are they living in their own world where Iran is the biggest superpower in the world and they can challenge the US and win. This is really a very important question when you do these kind of strategic things. Not only what do you think, okay, you want to have the true picture, to really understand the true picture. The next step is to understand whether the other side sees the same picture, whether they have some sort of rose glasses that they don't see the same picture as you. And you need to know that so you can kind of prepare for what they will do.
Right. OK. 好，那基本上呢，就是Tamuz他的回答，就是说，如果用很短的回答，就是说不知道，就不知道说这个伊朗政权他会不会来强力报复，那这个美国的这个战争啊，跟伊朗的战争会不会是持久战？他说，如果简单回答是不知道，但是呢，他觉得呢，就是说这个伊朗政权啊，就要看他们他们的这个领袖到底是不是很实际。就是说是不是能够认清现实？他认为呢，其实他们是没有机会的，没有机会这个强力报复，也没有机会说去跟美国能够打这个持久战哈。他还提出了一个，就是说如果按照就是说之前发生的事情，当那个川普上一届川普的时候，他就是打了苏莱曼尼嘛，结果伊朗就说要报复，但其实他们做不了很多，他们只是为了面子哈，就稍微打了一下这个。
朝没人的地方打了
几下，就是表示说他们会要做样子的意思。这基本上就是说他认为是他们没有机会的。好的，那刚才你查到了吗？
就是正统的。
OK. So the question is, how do you see the Jewish?
No. There's a particular how to say denomination. It's called Hasidic Judaism. You have any idea about it? Can you just comment on that a little bit?
I don't think it's really related to our discussion. It's a very long one.
True, yeah.
I can say that there are certain parts of the Jewish people today who are very, very Orthodox religious, and these people, whether you call them the Haredi or the Hasidim, they in the United States, for example, they live just in New York City, and they live in other places, but they really live in their own community. I mean, they go to work, they have their businesses, but all of their life is like within their community. I don't know if it's the right way to say it, but maybe like the Amish in a sense. They don't mix with others except for, I guess, business interactions. I don't know what else I can say, because it's so it's really beyond the scope of this I think, different people have different lives. I think in Iran, there are probably a lot of very religious people who also kind of just want to live among their own people. And, that different people have different faith and customs, and that's just how the world is.
Yeah.
OK， 好吧，他说的哈西迪教派就是伊朗非常，不是伊朗就是这个以色列人中非常非常保守的自己过自己就有点不能叫隐居的生活，就是自己那个非常传统的生活哈。它跟今天的话题没有直接关系哈，他简单说一下，
就有点像那个叫什么哈姆什，
对，隐居一样的，隐士一样的。
对，其实呢，就是就是说，我觉得大家对于这个一些中东啊、以色列一些历史确实非常关心。那如果您真的就是想要了解更多的话呢，我有跟Tamuz 做了这方面的专访，然后呢就会在近期给大家发布出来所以呢再次提醒您订阅一下我的频道，这样的话呢到时候新视频出来你就可以及时收到了。好的，那今天晚上已经很晚了，我们非常的感谢Tamuz 在这个能够来就是参与我们的节目，也感谢大家跟我们一起来度过这段时间。So Tamuz, really appreciate that you come to our show in such a short notice, to share your perspectives, and we really, really appreciate it.
Well, I hope it's helpful to your audience, and we'll have to wait and see. These are very interesting days. So every day, something else can happen, or we just wait and nothing happens. So we'll see what happens.
Okay.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. Right. So we look forward to having you on again when things happen.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tamuz.
好，那这样哈，感谢大家的收看，
谢谢大家，
明天再见喽。
OK，拜拜。
OK，拜拜。
拜拜。
拜。